The Still Loading podcast is brought to you by the wonderful people on Patreon. Amazing people like Kevin from the Bit by Bit Foundation, Eric H., Matt, aka Stormageddon, Gilmer, Mr. Biscuits, and Stephen P. have been wonderful enough to support the show over there. So if you would also like to get your name read at the beginning of an episode, please go over to patreon.com/stillloadingpod and check out everything it has to offer. On this episode of Still Loading, well. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today's episode is all about your well-being, actually the animal's well-being. Joining me today is Geoff Moonen from the Fun and Games podcast to talk about animal well. Geoff, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Josh. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show. And for kind of doing it last minute. I actually, a little behind the scenes, this came about really suddenly because I had another topic and guest lined up, and then just they ghosted me. Had never heard from them after things starting to get set up. I'm like, well, crap, I need to find something. I'm like, does anyone like Animal Well? I played that recently. You know, it's something that I can easily talk about. Oh, yeah. And then your co-host for Fun and Games, Matt, reached out to me and they said you're a big fan. And so here we are. We're here to talk about Animal Well.
Here we are. I am very excited to talk about Animal Well. This is definitely shot to the top of the list for me of like great games of the year.
And this is probably one of the most contemporary games I've ever covered on the show. Normally I do a lot of retro stuff, but I also don't like to limit myself to just retro games. I like to do modern ones as well. And this is by far like the newest game I've ever covered on the show. I think I've only ever covered one other game on the show the same year it came out, and it was the new Kirby game.
Oh, nice. Oh,
the new one for Switch? Yeah, the new 3D one.
Yeah, I'm completely blanking on it too. My brain keeps going, Planet Robobot. No, that's on the 3DS.
Forgotten Land.
Dreamland. No, that's on the Wii.
Forgotten Land. Kirby and the Forgotten Land.
Thank you.
Yeah, I covered that when it came out, I guess in 2022 or whatever it was.
Awesome.
But that was the last time I've covered a game that came out in the same year that the episode's coming out. So yeah, we are here to talk about Animal Well, developed by Shared Memory LLC, specifically by Billy Basso, who is a solo game dev, and he worked on this for a number of years. But before we dive into any of the history and any of the game stuff, I want to hear from you, Geoff. I want to hear about your personal experiences with Animal Well, how you kind of first got into the game. Admittedly, like we said, it's pretty new. So this personal experience section may be a little bit different than others. So Geoff, take it away. How did you first kind of get into this?
Oh, I remember my early memories with Animal Well. It's so long ago, but it's like it was yesterday. Actually, my experiences with Animal Well begin before its release. Because being a games podcaster, being what I like to call an ostensible games journalist, I've gone to a lot of gaming conventions to cover games and indie games. And so at PAX West last year, so last Labor Day weekend, I was there. It was my first time at PAX West, and it was the first PAX that it was just me going and not also Matt. Normally we like to tag team the conventions as we do this. So this was my first time at that convention, first time flying solo on that. And with very little oversight, I will go ham on the floor. So I play tested probably 36 games over the course of the weekend. Like that kind of, not all of them were, sit down interview times, but took notes, wrote things down, went for it, played all sorts of stuff. And I'm a sucker for a Metroidvania. So I played a ton of them. I wrote stuff down, but I was doing my best. I was fueled by just caffeine and chutzpah. And so So the convention was from Friday to Monday because it was Labor Day, and I think mid-afternoon on Sunday, I found Animal Well because again,
Oh.
PAX West is was in two different hotels, covering a bunch of spaces, everything else. And so you think you've walked the floor, but there's always a new nook and cranny, and especially with indie titles, a lot of them have like kind of sections, or I almost want to say they're huddled together for warmth in a way, and the situations and setups. So you can get kind of like cool lighting setups, or you think
Hmm.
this is all one publisher, but like, oh, what's in this little corner over here? And I feel like every convention there's at least one or two of those. But it wasn't until Sunday that I saw Animal Well, and it had like such a cool, relaxed vibe to it. It was a
Hmm.
little dimmer. They had a little bit of neon light, but not like glaring or anything like that. There wasn't music blasting at you. They had such comfortable seating for playing the game. Like
Oh.
exactly. It wasn't like plush couches, but it was just like
No lazy boys.
yeah, no lazy boys. It was those sort of like it wasn't like a yogi bow, but it was one of those kind of, cushions that you sit on and you just,
Hmm.
oh, this is nice. Yeah, what have you got? Oh, wow, this is beautiful. It's like a just warm, glowing CRT thing. Oh, look at that little guy I am. Oh, wow, this is so cool. Like, it was just one of those kinds of, I was so punchy that I needed Animal Well in the worst way, and I
Hmm.
didn't realize it. And so it was a, timed demo. And even as the timer goes down, it's like the iris slowly closes on the game. It wasn't even, there was nothing abrupt or crazy about it. And I already, it was just the first section of the game, which is already full of secrets. And you put me in a Metroidvania and I want to find secrets, and Animal Well is perfect for that. So all of this to say, I had such an amazing time playing the demo. And I was probably 50 feet from the booth when I forgot the name of the game. I was just that level of like, wow, that was great. And I feel like I already couldn't find it. It was one of those, was the booth even there to begin with? Did I
It
actually?
just zened you into to forgetting everything. It was like Zen grade amnesia.
Right. Well, and also a name like Animal Well is a distinctive but common name. It wasn't
Yeah.
like a name of a character. And there was also several other games where I did this with, where I was like, "Oh, this is really fun. Damn it, what was it called?" By the end of the weekend, I couldn't remember. And so I'd have like little things to look it up later. But Animal Well just kind of left my mind. And then May 9th came around, May 9th, 2024, its release date. And May 9th, 2024 was sort of like a big 0 hour of really good indie games coming out. And I remember a whole bunch of us losing our minds across the Twitter sphere and some of the Discords and whatever else. And so Animal Well came up amongst the games that were coming out, and I was excited about Crow Country most of all. But there were some other ones, A Thousand Times Resist, Cryptmaster, and those three games, Crow Country, Cryptmaster, Thousand Times Resist, I bought up day one on Steam. And Animal Well's like, why is that familiar? Is Wait a minute, is that the game I was thinking of? And looking at the screen, I'm like, there it is. I found it. I found you. Oh my God. And then I found out I'm a PS Plus subscriber. I already owned the game. And so
Oh.
I dropped all that money on those Steam games, and I've I've gone back to Crow Country. And the other two are on the backlog, but oh my God, then I just dived into Animal Well and I had the best time with it. And I'll talk about my play experience a little later on, I think, but that's sort of my I yeah, I mean, it is a recent game, but I do have a little bit of like history with it, and I'm really happy to share that.
Yeah, man. May 9th, just you bringing it up, I completely forgot how much of that was just like that was a huge day for indie games. Crow
Oh
Country,
yeah.
like you already mentioned, Little Kitty, Big City,
Little Kitty Big City. How's the other one? Yeah.
Brocula. I've never even heard of that.
I didn't hear about that one. And again, that especially that release day, I'm sure there are incredible games that came out that day. There's incredible indie games that come out every day. But that's May 9th, 2024 in particular is one where I'm like, you know what, if I missed it, I don't feel bad at all. I'm sorry, but I don't feel bad. But I will go back to it. But yeah, it is what it is. It's just
There,
a lot of good stuff. What a wonderful problem.
when did Lorelei and the Laser Eyes come out? Because that was a big one.
Oh, let me check that.
Was that also May 9th?
16th.
That was May 16th. So May
That
in
was 1 week
general was
later.
just yeah,
Yeah.
May this year was just the month of indies.
It was oops all bangers, you know.
Oh my goodness. For my own story though, for my own experience with Animal Well,
Mm.
FOMO hit me like a bitch. That's what
Hmm.
it did.
Hmm.
I saw all the hype for Animal Well. I was really curious. I was like, you know what? I kind of just want a game that I can play on my Switch, that I like can just take and play at work during my lunch breaks. Because at home, I'm usually dedicating time for this, whether it's recording, editing, or playing like console games or other stuff for it.
I hear that. Yeah.
Um, and even then, unless I'm streaming the game, it's hard to find time for it because
Yeah.
that never ending grind of like I got to do it for content. If I can stream what I'm going to play on the show, that is time efficient. I'm not only creating content, I'm also using it for other content. It's
If
like
you do what you
doubling down.
love as a job, your work-life balance just erodes.
Yep, pretty
Yep.
much.
Hmm.
And God, I wish I could actually do this for a job. But anyway,
Yeah,
uh,
fair.
so I got really hooked on it. I bought the game shortly after its release, played it, pretty much just could not put it down once I started. I could not stop playing it.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed experiencing all the secrets and like just kind of discovering the world. I'm also a fan for it's interesting. It's a double edged sword. It's or a very thin line, I guess, that it walks.
Hmm.
Where when a game like Animal Well or any game that does what Animal Well kind of does, where they give the player no direction, that could be one of the most rewarding things in the world, or the bane of its existence and mine.
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
it you have to it's such a hard balance to strike where you need to be able to make it like clear enough for what the player needs to do that they can figure it out, but
Hmm.
also obtuse enough that it's actually a challenge and it's a puzzle. If you go too far into the obtuse area, then you have games. I mean, this isn't an indie game, but like what is it? Mylon's Secret Castle, where
Hmm.
there's secrets everywhere and there's no rhyme or reason as to what you're supposed to do.
Oh yeah, there's no conveyance, there's no signposting, and I feel like we run into this a lot with throwback games these days, where a lot of older games you know, from youths, depending upon people's age, certainly mine,
Mhm.
where you've got games that either they haven't fully shaken off the slime of the arcade mindset, where just because you have the game at home, it still has, limited lives, or things where you only discover it by banging your head against it because put in another quarter and try again. Even the fact that, Super Mario Brothers 3, which doesn't have an arcade mindset at all, you don't find out about the warp whistle, like a hidden warp whistle, till 3 worlds later in Princess Peach's letter, because try again kind of feeling. But also, those older games and more modern games that want to have that idea or that feeling, remember, you try to go back to those games now. Yeah, what are you going to do? What are you going to find? They had instruction manuals. And a lot of those instruction manuals actually had the secrets or the tips in there. Is
Yep.
that good design? I don't know. It probably is making the most of the limited space that you had. But trying to just go off the surface level of that, you're absolutely right, Josh. You run into this kind of thing of you you're aping this with the wrong context. And often the I feel like the razor's edge on that kind of thing is how forgiving your experimentation is. Animal Well has a life meter and you can die, but there's ample save points and checkpoints. And there's plenty of hazards that don't actually do damage to you. You can't swim, but you can fall into the water as much
Mhm.
as you want. And I got to tell you, that made me bold enough to find a lot of secrets. Just those sorts of changes and those sorts of things. And there's no big animation on it. Drops you right back to where you
Mhm.
fell. And sometimes they even use it as a strategy to get back to somewhere quicker. So depending on you're right. There's all sorts of subtleties that we could probably sit here all day and pick apart about what makes for a good empty room that also is fun to explore and also conveys its ideas well.
And that water hazard thing you mentioned, that I thought that hurt me for the longest time because every time it would happen, I'm like, oh shoot, I'm going to die soon. I'm going to die soon. I'm like, wait, I've drowned like 6 times. How have I not lost a single bit of health? And then
Yeah,
I'm like,
right.
oh, maybe I should pay more attention to the health. And to your Mario 3 example, you are right, especially with the warp whistle, how it was not conveyed at all. So much so that the only way people knew about it was because they showed it in The Wizard,
Right.
the
Or you
movie
bought
from
the guidebook.
1989.
Yeah. They had to show it to you in some way. Like, otherwise, how are you going to find it?
Exactly.
Of course.
And that we can kind of use that to go as a transition into some of the development stuff with this game, because secrets are a huge part of this game. And
Oh, yeah.
just to throw it out there now, listeners, the spoiler wall is going to come a little bit earlier than normal. Normally, I don't like to talk spoilers so early, but this game, the game revolves around secrets, much like what I discussed with Jill in Tunic when we did the Tunic episode.
Oh, yeah.
That
It's very Tunic.
Yeah, where the actually I would say Tunic has more world building. That game has more story and world building than this, but
Hmm.
in terms of gameplay design, it's a similar idea structure where it's like they are it's almost a spoiler to talk about the gameplay mechanics, because the joy of Animal Well and Tunic is exploration and discovery. It's
Yes.
turning discovery into the core mechanic and focus of the for the player, versus other games you might continue on because you like the gameplay loop or you like the story or something like that. And don't get me wrong, Animal Well has good gameplay, but its
Yes.
gameplay reinforces its core design of discovery and the joy, giving players that sensation of discovery and the joy of discovery. um Billy
Ve-
Basso, when he developed Animal Well, he actually originally wanted to be a filmmaker, but after seeing Indie Game the movie, it inspired him to get into game development, and he ended up working at some pretty big studios like NetherRealm and also Phosphor Games before he started doing this solo project in his spare time in 2017, which became Animal Well. And I already mentioned Tunic. Basso was influenced by games like Tunic, but also Fez and The Witness.
Yeah.
Um,
I would even
Specifically in
argue.
Fez. Sorry, what, Jeff?
I would even argue that sort of Animal Well is kind of the breaking the meter in the middle of Tunic and Fez, where Fez was that joy of discovery and puzzle solving and discovering that there was puzzles, but built around one major mechanic that was executed in a lot of fun ways. Tunic is a little more of discovery and application of discoveries, and I think that Animal Well sits in a really nice middle there.
And actually, in speaking of Fez, one thing I read in an interview from Basso was that he looked at the backgrounds in Fez and would see what was happening in the backgrounds, and he kind of thought, wouldn't that be cool to like use that as part of the gameplay in some way, shape, or
Oh,
form?
yeah, yeah.
And that really underscores the way he implemented secrets in Animal Well, which we will get to all about, because there is a lot of different secrets in this game, and he designed this game for three different types of people.
Okay.
Um, I'm kind of stealing some of the names of these. I'm kind of paraphrasing this, and I'm also kind of creating the names for these levels. But
Mhm.
at least in the interview I saw, he listed there's a foundational level, which is any player of any skill level can play and experience and beat the game.
Yes.
The discovery level, which is the next level down, is meant for players who like to dig deeper and find some of the more obscure secrets. That I would kind of put myself in the middle of a foundational and discovery level player. Like, I like to go a little bit deep, but I seldom am ever able to get into a game deep enough to go fully into that mode. The final level, and probably the hardest level, like the most unlikely to do on your own, is the community level. Secrets that are
Hmm.
so obtuse that it takes a community to solve.
Yeah, I mean, I would put myself at the discovery level as well. I enjoy picking at things and pulling it apart and whatnot. But yeah, no, there's more than a few puzzles and solutions that are about, well, it's got a lot of moving parts. I got this part. Well, I got this part, and I got this part. It's a lot of, I think of like Valve games and some of the ARGs that they would do, where how would you know to take this song and run it through a spectrogram and know that that's a URL to something, or the Trials 2
Mm-hmm.
whole rabbit hole of a puzzle? No one person is going to find it, but you might stumble upon something, and that's kind of the coming out the other side of the secret castle idea, of the Tower of Druaga arcade idea of, well, you discovered a secret and you're in the arcade and you're going to tell somebody else in the
Hmm.
arcade, and that's how we all figure it out. It's the schoolyard rumor that actually has substance, but now we have the internet, and that is where it comes out the other side, which is very cool. I just don't do it, unfortunately.
Same. Who has the time? Who has the time?
Plenty of people, and
I
thank
guess
you for
so.
your service. We're just not those people, and that's fine. It takes all
Well,
kinds.
and like what I mentioned with Jill on the Tunic episode, this game is doing its best to recreate the playground feel. Like when
Yeah,
you're in elementary school and you have playground rumors going, oh, like, I don't know what year, oh my gosh.
muse under the truck at the SSN kind of
Yes,
thing.
thank you. I was about to say I don't know what year, like how old you are, but like my frame of reference is always Pokemon, trying to figure out like, oh, if you go to this one spot and you do this, you go to the like you said, there's a muse under the truck of the SSN, or like
How to evolve into Peekaboo, a Pokemon that
uh-huh,
totally isn't
uh-huh,
Meryl. Oh
or your
yeah.
uncle works at Nintendo and all the secrets, stuff like that. So
Exactly.
these games, Tunic and Animal Well, they, I think, have done the closest job of recreating that same sensation through in a digital age, in a world that's chronically online. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's,
yeah,
it's it's a wonderful stage that we're in right now for that.
mhm. Well, it's for once kind of using the internet community for good. Like
Mhm.
we so much of what we see online now is so much toxicity, and generally because I'm not going to get too wrapped up in it, but algorithms
Yeah.
really push negative stuff because that's what sells. Get the
Sensation.
clicks,
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah.
um but it's nice to see games like this that promote cooperation in order
Mhm.
to solve their greater levels, or the greater level of secrets, the community level. And like I
Yeah.
said, Basso did not call them this. They were just talking about how uh I think I'd have to find the interview again, but they specifically mention foundational level,
Mhm.
and then there was discovery, and then there's community secrets. So I just kind of
Yeah.
labeled them as like discovery level, community level, and I kind of paraphrased the interview. I'll have to find the interview again, and I'll include it in the show notes because I think it's worth reading some of the stuff that was in there.
Absolutely.
Um,
I don't think I've read the interview, but I have also heard Animal Well described as, yeah, 4 layers of a game. And
yep.
I think, yeah, Foundation and Discovery and Community played into those layers and what you were looking for and what kind of game you were playing and how far you delve.
And it's all up to you, and that's what's kind of
Yeah.
fun. The game really encourages you to dive further into those levels because there's enough teased on the screen, and like once you find out some of the secrets, you're like, it's kind of like, it reminds me a little bit of you ever heard of the like Sword Quest for the Atari 2600?
Yes, actually.
Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about with how they did the
The
the the
contest.
the contests and stuff like that.
Yes. Yes, yes.
Yes. Just a real brief primer for those who don't know, for the listeners who don't know. Back in the early 80s, when Atari was at the top of their game, they released a series of games called Sword Quest. I've brought this up on the show before, but, just in case this is a first time listener who hasn't heard that episode,
Of
and I
course.
don't even remember which episode I would have brought this up in. Maybe I brought it up in Tunic earlier this year and completely forgot. I don't know.
It's still
Um,
good refresher. It's
it
Sword Quest.
is.
More people should know about it.
I don't know why I'm prefacing this so much. I just want to, I guess, combat internet rage. I don't know. Uh, I forget half the shit I say after I say it. Anyway, Sword Quest came out in the early 80s, and it was basically it was just an event, like a RPG-ish adventure game. I don't know how, I wouldn't say RPG, but it's definitely inspired by,
Like a
like
mazy
fantasy.
dungeon crawler kind of thing.
Yeah. And so the objective was, there was a contest that Atari was running in conjunction with the game, and there's going to be 4 games in the series: Earthworld, Fireworld, Waterworld, and Airworld. And basically, when the first game came out, it was Earthworld. You would play through the game, and as you got to different sections of the game, you would see 2 numbers appear on the screen. Those numbers corresponded to a page and panel number of a comic book that also came with your copy of the game. It's not like it was a separate thing; it all came together, and it was done by DC Comics. The artwork was done by like George Perez and some really like like big names in the comic book industry.
Yeah, it was,
And
Jerry Conway and Roy Thomas, I think, were the
yes,
writers.
yep. And you basically would go to that page and that panel number or that panel, and there would be a hidden word in the image of that panel. Once you beat the game and got all the hidden words, you would have to then take all those words and then look at the hint at the beginning of the comic book and use that to kind of unscramble it into a sentence. And also some of the words were fake, so you had to kind of use the hints from that. Like there was like a sentence at the beginning of the comic book pretty much that alluded to what the answer was.
Hmm.
So then you would, if you figured it out, you would send that into Atari, and then they would gather up all the winners to come back to play one final level. And the winner of that, so every, probably, thousands of kids submitted entries for this, and
Hmm.
probably only, I don't know how many, maybe let's even say 100 or so.
Yeah.
That is completely fictitious number, I don't know, but let's just say 100 or so actually got the answer correct. So they brought those 100 kids in, and they would then compete with one final level that they had not played, and then whoever won that would win a really valuable, like they would win a grand prize. And I'm not talking like here's just $10,000. I'm talking like you would, like the winner of Earthworld won, I think it was no, not a philosopher's stone, it was the, oh my gosh,
I
I
got the Wikipedia up. It was an 18-karat solid gold
thank
disc
you.
studded with 12 diamonds, the birthstones of the 12 zodiac signs, and a miniature white gold sword set atop it. And for
Yes,
Earthworld, about 5,000 entries were received, but only 8 answered correctly.
there you go. See, wow, I went way higher.
Many will enter, few will win.
Then they made it cryptic for a reason. So
Yeah.
then now, unfortunately, I believe that medallion no longer exists. Maybe some of the jewels still are around, but
Oh,
it ended up
jeez.
it ended up getting smelted down and sold, like for parts, pretty much.
Makes
But the
sense.
winner of Waterworld, the next one, won a chalice of platinum and gold. The
Wow.
or
As
no, I'm
Fireworld was
sorry,
the
that was
next one, but it
Fireworld.
was
That
the
was
chalice,
Fireworld.
yeah.
Waterworld won a crown, and then the winner of Airworld would have won a Philosopher's Stone, which was like a jade stone and like a gold box. And like if y'all are curious what exactly each thing was, like it's gold and jewel encrusted. That's it in a nutshell. And each prize for each of those games was worth $25,000 in 1981 money, mind you.
Yep.
1981. I did a video for a YouTube channel back in like 2021 or something like that,
Mm.
and talking about this, and adjusted for inflation at the time, it's probably a little bit more now, but it ruins the joke. They were worth a very nice $69,000 in today's money.
Man, I could buy like 5 PS5 games with that.
I could buy a house with that. That would be a great down payment.
That'd be an amazing down payment on a house. Jokes
Oh my god.
aside.
I'll
And
put
well,
this up for collateral.
yeah. And so I love the fact that, yeah, that whole explanation, which is all true and is all bananas, is actually a very apt analogy or comparison
For
for
what?
Animal Well.
Yeah.
And it is exactly my jam. And I also only found out about Sword Quest in the last year.
It's it,
I do know about it because I have the Atari 50th anniversary arcade cabinet.
yeah.
That same
Oh.
that same PAX West where I played Animal Well, there was a drawing for them at the Atari booth and we were the winners. So
Wow, that's awesome.
yeah, that's its own story. That is for my partner to tell. That's her story. She was there for that. But
That's so cool though.
it was very fun. And so it has Sword Quest. It doesn't have Airworlds though. Airworld was released for the Atari 50th anniversary
Yep.
console and PC release. So I will play it one day.
Well, that was also made by Digital Eclipse. Like technically,
Yes.
Airworld never was finished, and they looked at the original design docs and tried to
Mhm.
finish it to the best of their ability, which I'm sure was good because
Oh
Digital
yeah.
Eclipse does good work. But it is
But
just nuts. And
oh
then the
yeah.
winner of those four games would have come together for one final prize if it had, the Atari crash happened, I believe, shortly, like right before the third game came out. So the third game
Yeah.
was only sent in, you could only obtain it through
Waterworld
mail
was
order.
released in 1984, so that was like everything was crashing when that
Yep.
happened.
Crash had pretty much crippled everything. And apparently there was a tournament for the third prize for Waterworld, but obviously Airworld never came out, so there was
Mhm.
never the fourth tournament, which means there was never a fourth winner. Because what would have happened if all four came out, the four winners would all meet back together one final time for one more competition to win the Sword of Ultimate Sorcery. Same thing, sword with a gold and jewel encrusted hilt and shit like that, worth
Mhm.
$50,000 in 1981 money. So just put
Oh
that
my
math in there.
gosh.
It's
Like
insane.
this is a D&D adventure waiting to happen. I'm just putting that out there.
And shout out to what is it? There is a comic book series that came out somewhat recently. I think written by Chris Sims.
Mhm.
I'm going to double check. Quest comic.
It was in 2017. That was when it was announced. It was written by Chad Bowers, Chris Sims, art
Yep.
by Scott Kowalchuk. Yeah.
Yep. And I've only read the first issue or so, but it's a really cool take on it where instead of being about the game itself, it's about a bunch of friends. It's about a little bit of a heavy topic right here, but one of the basically this guy who's estranged from his childhood friends finds out he is like terminal. He's terminally ill,
Hmm.
and so he wants to relive the happiest moment of his childhood, which is the summer of Sword Quest, trying to do it. So he's trying to get him and his friends back together one final time to finally play through and beat Sword Quest and like do the whole thing.
Because
It's
yeah,
I need to really, I own it. I'm pretty sure I own the whole run. I just have to actually read it.
finding the time is rough, and I can only imagine what a mountain of a task that was back in the 80s to play, and what it is for the
Seriously.
fictional characters in the comic. Playing it on the arcade cabinet is fun, but also that whole you have to have all the references and whatnot. There is an app. I'm able to find it. I'm able to do that. I mean, I'm not going to be winning anything gold encrusted about it, but that is also an apt comparison for kind of what we were talking about before about sort of empty room. You don't know what's going on and you're missing some of the pieces, and we're just building on that. So, yeah,
Mhm.
Sword Quest, everybody.
Yeah, sorry for kind of a long-winded tangent there, but like you said, Jeff, it is applicable. Like that spirit of discovery and almost a community level of discovery, because you work through it with the people around you trying to figure it out.
Oh, yeah,
Um, it very much speaks to what uh, Animal Well was trying to do, and I would argue succeeded extremely well.
agreed.
Um, so before we get, I said, oh, we're going to be a quick spoiler wall. We're 35 minutes into the episode. We barely talked about the game, just kind of what the game makes you feel, which, you know what? That's kind of, I guess, what art is supposed to do.
Hmm.
Um, the gameplay itself, the way the
Yes.
game works is you play as this little pink ball. Is it pink or yellow? I don't even remember. Is it yellow? I
I, I
just played
always,
it again this morning.
I always
Son of a
describe it as
nutcracker.
kind of looking like a hamster meets Jake the dog from Adventure Time. So it's a little bit of like a golden brown kind of thing.
Yeah. And it does change color depending on the lighting of the room you're in.
Oh, yeah, the lighting in this game is incredible.
Hmm.
Especially
Really
considering how
pretty
I think
game.
it's only a 34 megabyte sized game.
It's not. I can't believe it too. Like it is a massive game, and they. I don't know how they fit that into such a small amount. Like that, it's so tiny. That is so tiny.
I think it's the art assets and everything. The pixel art is pixel art. It's not high def. It just is crisp pixels. And rather than being developed in any particular engine, Billy Basso developed all the tools he needed. So there's sort of no extra fat on it. It's
Hmm.
kind of one of those. I think in some interviews that I've read with him, it's kind of a like I wasn't trying to make a point or anything. It wasn't like a demo scene idea where you're trying to do the most with like 68K memory. It was just a matter of he just needed what he needed, and this is what was left. I just always find it very funny that, I played it on my PlayStation 5, and the size of the file that was the banner art for it is bigger than the actual game.
That's just like that's just such a stupid metric to think about, but
I
it
know.
but it makes sense. And you're right. Now I think about it, like people always talk about about how like how does Nintendo get the most out of their systems type of thing. Like how do you fit Breath of the Wild on the Switch type of
Mhm.
thing. And I almost wonder if part of that is that they build all their proprietary software so they can
Of
fine
course.
tune it. It's more expensive, but they're able to end up getting more out of their games in the long run. I guess you know.
I would imagine so, yeah.
So you play as this little blob, you know, orange, purple, yellow, kind of changes color,
Mhm.
and you hop around and you explore this big open world Metroidvania. You can pretty much do it in almost any order that you want. I believe the this I don't think this spoils too much. For, if I am correct, you need to get firecrackers in order to progress out of the first area, no matter what. Unless you have know some really like unless you have some really good like game breaking mechanics. I'd be curious to watch a speedrunner try to do it. But I
Yeah.
when I replayed the opening for this game today in preparation for this, I'm 99% certain that you need to get the firecrackers in order to go up to the next area. But once you do, it's it's pretty much open ended from there, and you just
Mhm.
run around and explore. You get different items, which I won't even spoil what the items are because it's kind of a spoiler in a sense.
Yeah.
Um,
And just about everything does more than one thing. There's usually an obvious use. And
yes,
then there is, without any kind of like actual literal signpost or arrows drawn or anything else, you just sort of work with what you know and play around with it, and it definitely fosters a sense of play. And yeah, I would
hmm
say the biggest signposting is using the firecrackers, where it's clearly the only thing you can pick up in that area, and you have an obstacle, so you're like, I'm just going to use it. It has more uses than that, but it has that obvious use, and it gets you through that obstacle, and you go from there.
and I'm looking at the like the first zone pretty much like where you start off. I'm looking at the map right now.
Yeah.
And I'm just double checking, like, is there some other way that you can get to some, like, to a specific area early? There is a jump that is impossible for you to make without an item.
Mhm.
And so the only way to progress through to the kind of like where the world opens up is after you get the firecrackers. Like, you have to absolutely get the firecracker first in order to progress through it.
And I think
Um,
too, the firecrackers are your only consumable item, and they are in ready supply, but it is your consumable item. So I think there's a little bit of that too.
Yes, I was double check. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it is the only consumable item. So you have to be obviously extra. You have to not use them. You don't have to worry too much. They give them to you pretty frequently throughout the game.
But I
So it's not
think
like you
that
have to be sparing with them.
right, but I think that also, again, in that very telling you without telling you, but guiding you, it shows that it's meant for getting past single obstacles. Like clearly, once you use it to get past those obstacles, they're gone, or at least gone for a while, or gone permanently, depending. But it's a
I
clear,
believe
oh,
they
that's
are
what you do.
gone permanently until you die, and then
Okay,
then stuff respawns. A
then
little
stuff
bit,
responds.
kind of Dark Souls esque, but not really at the same time. Like this game is
Yeah.
nothing like Dark Souls, but just thinking of kind of like how the game kind of almost gives you an instance of itself. Like
Hmm.
any enemy you take out, they're gone for good unless you come back later on. And there's not a lot of
Makes
enemies in
sense.
this game at all.
No, there's very few. There's very few hostile creatures, and there's very few dangers that are hostile creatures. But there are plenty of environmental hazards. There's plenty of other things going on. There's very few matters in the game, in fact, in the whole world, that are urgent. That's the
Hmm.
other thing. The moments with the firecrackers are typically ones of urgency. And I think that also ties into the consumable nature where there's a little bit of a, throw the thing kind of idea. But anywhere else, most rooms, 99% of the rooms, I almost want to say, are just keep trying. Try something else. Figure it out.
Well,
It could be frustrating, but just try again.
well, and something that I just when I was replaying it this afternoon, um, when you get the firecrackers, like so when you come out of the opening zone,
Hmm.
just talking about the game design of this and how well it's executed. So basically when you climb all the way up there's a phone which you're like what's this phone do, so you go up to it and it shows you and you hit the action button and it gives you an option to save. I'm like, oh, okay, so that's how I can save my game as I go through. Cool.
Yeah.
Then obviously you can go either left or right. If you go to the right, then there is an enemy that will show up on screen and you have no way of taking them out. They will hunt you relentlessly on that screen. Once you leave the screen, they won't follow you, but
Mhm.
you kind of are like shit out of luck unless you kite them around and kind of work your magic a little bit with it, because there is a crank there that will then raise a platform for you to get over to a ladder to climb up to the next section. So if you're really good, you can leave this area without the firecracker, but the way that the game intends it to you is that you're supposed to panic with this enemy, go back to the left, and then explore over there and try the firecracker. And I guess this is slight spoilers. I know I said, but I don't. This is just the intro. I don't think this spoils the rest of the game.
Oh,
This is very minor spoilers here.
oh yeah, I would say all of this was within that demo time that I played at PAX West. So, and I think
Mhm.
if you're within that, we're fine.
And so when you go over back to the left, right, and you see another crank that'll raise a platform. This time there's no enemy there though, so you can learn the mechanics unimpeded by some enemy.
Hmm.
You then traverse over the water after you raise the platform, and you can see here that there are three buttons, or there's like a area that you can't get to that you need, that has like three switches on, but but you see three yellow buttons on the screen. There's one that's easily accessible and the others are not. um, so you access the first one, or what is it, you hit the one button and all of a sudden you see a light up on the little wall that is blocking your path, right?
Hmm.
Then you do the same thing for the second one, and then I believe you have to, by figuring out there how did, then you see where the third one is, and so, which is up top and you can't reach it. You're like, all right, well, how do I do that? But you see there's a trail leading to it from the right side of the screen. You're like, okay, well, let me go back to the first screen that with the telephone, and then you can see where the trail begins, and you see there's a moving platform going across. So you have to kind of backtrack through by following the trail that's above you that you couldn't quite reach, and then you're back to the room with the enemy. You're like, okay, well, if I jump around this real quick and the enemy won't be able to catch me, and then I can get up to the top portion of that screen. And then you traverse all the way over. And the reason I say all this, the reason I'm going to so much detail, is because this section here is teaching you how the game wants you to think to solve the puzzles, where you have to look at the breadcrumbs it's giving you and be able to use logic in order to solve it. Like, it's, the game doesn't tell you like, okay, you have to backtrack two screens to then go up to the top level to hit this last button that you need. It
Hmm.
just it gives you visual things on the screens, like yellow buttons sticks out, so you're automatically going to go over and see if you can jump on it. So you jump on the one that's easily accessible and you see it's going to open a gate for you. Like,
Right.
okay, I get that. And then you see another one where like, even to get to the second button, you kind of have to find a little secret where you kind of fall down to the left of the pool of water, and then you can take a little tunnel underneath and go around from the opposite side. And it's a little hard to explain without a visual aid, but
But it does lead you there, and you feel
mhm,
like you discovered something because you did.
exactly. And then the third one, the one that's literally unreachable, you can't figure out how to get to it, is you you just kind of, you see where it is at the top, you see there's a path leading to it from the right hand side of the screen, so you just follow the path and you follow that lot. Like, okay, I see this path, okay, I see how I'm supposed to get to this path, and it's from this movable platform. How do I get to the movable platform? Oh, there's another path continuing to the right, to the next screen over to the right. Okay, let me go over there. And you just kind of keep figuring this out bit by bit until you get to it. You hit that third button, you open the door, and then you get the firecracker, and then the game gives you a chance to use the firecracker on an enemy that's not the first one that you encounter, and you realize by throwing the firecracker that's how you can take out the enemy. So then they give you like three firecrackers in that room, so you have so much to work with. You have actually a total of
Yeah.
six firecrackers within the
You
bottom, the two
three.
screens that are right
Oh,
near it.
the ones you can pick up. You can only hold on to three.
Yep.
Gotcha.
but you get all that. And the reason I say all of that, like I said, not only does the first half teach you how the game wants you to use its logic, the once you open that gate and you get the firecrackers, to drop down to the lower level and to get more firecrackers and to see how to use them and how what enemies you can take out with them, the drop is hidden behind a waterfall, but there's a ledge that's angling up to the up, like the top left, so it kind of guides your eye to look up in that up left, and you can see there's a gap between where the ledge ends and then where the wall of of the screen is. So you it kind of teaches you there just subtly, like, oh, I can, maybe there might be something here. What if I jump over here? And then you drop down and you explore more. I just think the way that they broadcast this stuff is so subtle, but really well executed. I like breaking it all down. And this is just the first zone. I'm not going to do this for the whole game, obviously, but just showing you how to. It's teaching you the logic of how to explore and then the logic of how to find secrets, all
Yes.
within this first zone. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's like the first half dozen screens. Hearing kind of your breakdown of it reminds me of the idea of we both record podcasts, and I've done a fair amount of work either recording music or live sound or theater tech and things like that. It makes me think of troubleshooting, where
Yeah.
I see something's going on. I just need to follow the line of it. It is a puzzle and it does look confusing, but if you just take a moment and follow the path, you're going to find it. And that is still a discovery, and that is still solving the puzzle, and it is still deeply satisfying.
Hmm.
And you're right, it shows you that, and none of these are sort of square angles or right angle square screens. When I think of a Metroidvania, and certainly sort of the general idea, it's like square rooms, rectangle rooms kind of connecting to each other that sort of work together. I know there's so many Metroidvanias that aren't like that. But this one in particular, something that I loved finding out is, in that same way that, this is only a 34 megabyte file size because Billy Basso used what he needed and made what he wanted, there's very little wasted space. And
Hmm.
it's always worth checking everywhere, and where it might feel a little bit like, all right, I have these items. Do they do anything? And it feels almost like the old point and click adventures of, let me just try absurd things. Maybe something happens. There is always enough of logic. And something I really enjoyed on the community level is when I played through this game, I didn't play it quickly. I probably put in about 24 full playtime hours into the game over the course of a month or so, a little bit at a time. But I didn't look up a lot of solutions. I really didn't look up solutions. But if I felt a little stuck and went, okay, I can see where I want to go. I feel like I've got this. I just need to try a few approaches on it. A lot of folks online and a lot of different forums, Reddits, Discords, whatever, people were very in that vein, in that mood, in that mode. It was a lot of, I'm in this room, I'm having this trouble, and people going, you have everything you need. You're okay. Keep
Hmm.
trying. It's not like a Legend of Zelda thing where it's, I can't do this. Well, you don't have the gauntlets. How was I supposed to know that? Kind of thing.
Yep. the
So
the
it's
game is
cool.
designed in a way that no area is necessarily like like a like a dead end. Like there is some elements, like you, to access certain areas you need certain items, but you can't get to that area unless you have the item in the first place. So
Hmm.
it's not like you get to the item and get to the area like, oh, I can't do anything here because I don't have the right item yet. No,
Yeah.
you would need the item to even unlock that, which in turn means that everything you need to find it is already there with you.
Right. There's a lot of layers within layers. And something that I also really appreciate, in addition to, you know, I think just about every item has more than one use. And the number of uses, that doesn't matter, more than one. But also, some secrets can be found by some items in a way that seems arbitrary. And then
Hmm.
later on through your playthrough, you might find another item, and one of its other uses actually points out why those work or did that. You happen to find something early. And so there's a fun discovery of, oh, why did that happen? How did that happen? Oh my gosh. And then later going, oh, oh, now I feel secure, safe, excited to run through this whole area and just try everything out all again. That feeling of oh my gosh, I got double jump. Where can I go in this castle now? Happening over and over again, sort of in this like Matryoshka doll all the way
Hmm.
down. It's very cool. And there's plenty of stuff in the environment in the world and some of the items that you pick up that aren't even necessarily traversal items or things that you need to unlock. They just have a vibe about them. And I'm probably looking at the same map you are right now, Josh. And there was a thing early on that I went, I never figured out what that was. And I just looked at it and went, oh my God, yeah, no, that's exactly what that was. It did nothing for my progress in the game. I didn't miss out on anything. But if you could figure out what it was, it probably helped you out with something. So there's plenty of that, things that are allowing multiple approaches to a solution for all of the obstacles within the game, which is nice. It's not necessarily single solution all the time. Sometimes, but usually that's a little more obvious.
Hmm. Hmm. I think that's like what makes the design of this so interesting and well crafted is that, like you said, there's no one solution to the game. But also, something that Basso specifically said in the interview I read was that he hated in Metroidvanias how, and you kind of referenced it with Zelda, how like you need that one item and it gatekeeps you from an entire portion of the game that
Yeah.
is needed. And it's, well, there are elements of that in this game. It's not very much. You can pretty much almost get to any other area, and he even mentioned how depending on which items you get first, because you can get items in different orders than other people. Like I think I was
Yeah.
talking to Dave Jackson from Tales from the Backlog about his playthrough and how like the first item he got was completely different than the first item I got.
Huh.
Uh, and that I thought that was really interesting. And depending on which order that you get items in, like I think I got the bubble wand first.
Oh, interesting. I got
Yeah.
disc first.
See, I didn't find the disc until much later because the disc you have to like. Oh, that's a whole thing. We'll get into how
Oh,
you
no,
get
no.
the
Getting
disc.
the disc captivated me was the thing.
That was tough but fun.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And I would argue that there are almost like tiers of items. There's certain ones that's like you're not going to find that before this. But yeah, like the bubble wand and the disc, because we already named those, and a few others. Yeah, they're like
well, we didn't say how
order.
they work, and that's part of the joy of the game is discovering what those items can do.
Yes.
So we won't go any further into what those abilities are right here. But
Hmm.
Basso did say like he didn't like how in some Metroidvanias, there would be like one specific thing that you need to do in order to progress through the rest of the game, and Animal Well doesn't really do that.
No.
The only thing that you or the only thing you have to do to get a little bit farther into parts of the game is like I believe you have to like what is it? You light four torches or whatever, and then all of a sudden like the ground kind of. I'm not even gonna go into it right now. There's a whole
There
bunch.
and once you get up into that area with the first telephone, the first save area, pretty nearby to there is oh no, you go up a little further. Past that first obstacle, I want to say. There is a clear like, well, this is important.
Yeah,
And
kind of like
you
what in Super Metroid, how they have the
the
four
four
boss statues,
statues.
the boss
Yes.
statues. Yeah,
It's
similar
very much
idea.
that. Yeah, the first
Um,
very open area.
but it reminds me of like that criticism he said reminds me of one of the biggest issues I have with the original Metroid. I played the original Metroid for the first time in like November last year.
Oh, that's rough
Um,
to go back to.
I really enjoyed parts of it, but this is a slight spoiler for the original Metroid. Nearly 40-year-old game at this point. It's coming
Samus
up
is
on
a
40
girl.
soon. Um, the only way for you to beat the game is that you have to beat what is it, Kraid and Ridley, and then or
Yep.
whatever all the bosses are. To get to Ridley, there is one entrance to an entire third of the map, which you find by randomly bombing a floor at the bottom of one of the big like tunnel shafts or
Yep.
whatever, and you bomb that and you fall through, and then it unlocks the entire last third of the game where Ridley is at. And unless you bombed that one random spot, which you'll find random bomb spots that you can blow up, but doesn't mean that it's going to take you to the right place. Unless you bomb that one random spot, you cannot figure out the last third of the game. And I think that is one of the most that is such awful design in my opinion. I
I
can't
agree.
I can't forgive it almost like that. I liked what I played of that game until I got to that point. I'm like, how the fuck was anyone supposed to figure that out? That is
Schoolyard and Nintendo Power, pretty much.
pretty much.
And bombs were plentiful. They were unlimited, and you already by that point found, oh, if you bomb places, you'll unlock things. It doesn't excuse the design, but I do see where they're coming from. And all the way to Metroid Dread, the most recent Metroid. I loved Metroid Dread, but they were also something that I don't know if I call it a full-on criticism, but it does cause pause.
Mhm.
You get items, you end up using pretty much every button on the Switch controller, which kind of feels cool. Like, we use the whole, the Bass-O-Matic uses the whole bass here. But the thing is, that's not great for various dexterity issues and ability. But also, some of the items, there's a missile upgrade that you get that is, it locks on 5 times and it shoots 5 missiles at once. Cool, that's separate from the missile upgrade, and you mostly need that to unlock a few doors.
Okay.
And that's one where you see some items, you see some things, and even in other Metroids that happen where like Metroid Fusion upgraded Super Metroid in terms of, all right, you get missiles. Well, you get super missiles. Are those separate from missiles? No, you just have super missiles now. Or it's a much easier kind of putting it together, linking those things and not having them all be separate pieces. So yeah, it's another aspect of intentionally Byzantine design, or one item, one use, you forget you have it. I mean, there's not that many items in Animal Well, but I still had moments where I was like, oh right, I have that. Cool, let me try that. And that almost was fun though.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Mhm. Um, I think we've talked about the gameplay enough that I think listeners who have not played the game have more than a good idea. I liked how I said in the beginning, like, oh, the spoiler wall is going to come up really early. We're an hour in, um,
But also understand, we've said so much. There's still so much
without
more.
saying anything.
So much more.
Well, I think what's so cool about this game is how it really evokes an emotion, and I
Yes.
would say one of the hardest things, and I don't tell me if you feel this way as well. One of the hardest things to be about being a gamer now is that since you've seen so much, it's hard to go back to that whimsy, that childhood, the childlike sense of wonder. And Animal Well kind of does that. It
A little
kind
bit,
of
yeah.
it kind of reinforces that in you and like kind of lets you re-experience a little bit of your childhood in some way, shape, or form. And just by having a game where literally I like, you can go into the wiki, not everything's discovered still. It's
Yeah,
there's
no.
still stuff. I mean, granted, whenever you, the listener, may be listening to this, maybe everything's been discovered now, but at least at the time of recording this, not everything is known. There's still so much more to discuss or to explore and find and whatnot, and that's awesome. So I think we've been talking so much about this and how the gameplay works and how the mechanics make us feel is because this game successfully does what it set out to do. Like, Bassa wanted to make a game filled with secrets that had different layers and different levels of difficulty in terms of secret, and give players that sense of discovery. And something you said earlier, Geoff, really kind of resonated with me, where the simple act of just figuring out a path moving forward, like we talked, like when I was going through the whole beat by beat of the first section,
Yeah.
like that, like figuring out how to get to that top button should not be that rewarding as it is. Like, all you're doing is like, oh, I just have to take the top path. And so you go to it. But because the game doesn't tell you to take the top path, it doesn't tell you anything, it doesn't tell you what to do at all. You feel like you figured it out. And
Hmm.
it's one of those things. You ever hear like an expression that's so cliche until someone says it in a slightly different way, and all of a sudden it clicks and makes sense?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what this game is for me with the sense of
Yeah.
discovery. Like, when people is like, the game doesn't tell you, you figure it out on your own. I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I know what you're saying. You figure it out on your own, blah, blah, blah.
I
But
think the
this game
difference.
really made me feel that. Like, other games that I've played that people have said done that, like, I can see it, but I've never felt that. This game made me feel that. And that's what I
Yeah.
can say is the biggest compliment I can give to this game.
Well, because I think the difference is some of those games you feel like you're left to the wolves kind of thing.
Yeah.
This, it's not so much that the game doesn't tell you. It's that the game is in conversation with you. And not one that's
Mm.
text boxes and signs, but one that is, yeah, you are playing with your instincts as a gamer, as an explorer, as whatever, as a little, hamster like blob. But you're going about these things and okay, yeah, you find this, you hit that. What am I supposed to do? You know instinctively you're doing what the game is asking you to do, but you are also discovering what the game is asking you to do. When you have a conversation with somebody, podcasts are we're both kind of talking a bit more expounding, but a conversation with
Mm.
somebody, you're helping each other to your ideas, to your point, to telling a story, to getting somewhere. There's no points involved. There's no any of that in casual conversation. I'm not talking about debate team, but for this, this is that idea where it's, we want to get to that idea together. We want to open that door. Well, there's these buttons. Okay, well, let me follow that, do that. I think I know what you're talking about, but if I go a little back here, well, I've got that for you. Oh, perfect. Thank you. And we're going to hop back up there and get that. And we made it. And
That's a good way to think about it. I like that.
yeah, the game is telling you, but not in the way that we think. The game is in conversation with you about its telegraphing.
That is a perfect way to describe it. The game's not telling you; it's in conversation with you, and that is Animal Well. That is a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I like that. Print it.
Copyright you. I'm not going to take credit for that. Was beautiful. But no, let's move into the overall visuals and graphics. Now, graphics, visuals, sound, the overall
The
aesthetic of the
vibes.
game, the vibes. Yes, the
This
vibes.
this game
Before
is vibes.
the man, I was. This game is the most bizarre combination of simplistic but eerily hauntingly beautiful graphics.
Yes. It's a lot of, well, to have a last little gameplay but leads into this. It all goes to that, like you were saying, reclaiming whimsy, where anything is possible. And this one is one that's a little safe but also a little dangerous. Warm and colorful, but also empty and eerie.
And
And all of it's
isolationist, like very isolating.
oh, yeah, and never meant to make you scared. It just simply is. So that whenever anything happens, you're left with a little bit of interest, excitement, but also wariness and trepidation. And so it kind of sets the pace. This is a game that's already had speed runs. Summer Games Done Quick already did both a no major glitches and glitched run of this. I watched it. It was so fun.
I
But
need to go back and watch that. I might put it on the background when I'm editing this.
oh yeah, no, the glitched run I think was like 4 minutes. It was wild.
What? Okay, I can watch that before I record. Or before I edit. Good to
Yeah.
know.
The second the main one that they do is a little longer. The second one was kind of like, all right, we're done. Now this is why we did this run and not the glitched run because it looks like this and time. But yeah, it is a game that can be speed run, but it's not a game that makes you run. You want to take it in. You want to like every room has details. The colors shift. The and like you were saying about Billy Basso talking about Fez. What's going on in the background there? What if that was the game?
And some of the secrets revolve around that background stuff, which I
Yeah,
we will save for the spoiler talk. Um,
absolutely.
but it is like even just in the way that the animals look too, right? Like I have a screenshot up right now of the swans or whatever that are like or what
Oh,
would you, cranes maybe
yeah,
in,
yeah.
in like
Jerk
the
water
water
birds.
underneath, because the first time you see them, like they're such interesting creatures because they're not enemies but they're also not friends because
Hmm.
they like yeah, I guess this is a very minor spoiler for those, just in case anyone is curious, but or in case anyone wants to remain as spoiler free as possible, jump like 10 seconds ahead. But like when you get to them and you hop across the lily pads in their area, they don't hurt you when you touch them. They only hurt you when they peck at the water, which they don't always peck at you. They're just kind of pecking aimlessly.
Yeah.
And
Every
so
animal in the game has their own behavior. Some of them are never dangerous. Some of them are always dangerous, and some of them are they're all of them are just doing what they're doing, and you are an animal amongst that as well.
yes. Uh, and just the visual, like everything about the animals, even the though I will say the ghost that you come across later on, I couldn't tell what animal it was for a while. I know now.
Hmm.
I'll spare what that is for the
The
spoiler
spoilers.
section,
Yeah.
but yeah. Now the music and like sound, I think the sound design is really great in this. I don't really recognize any music all that much other than like a couple. It's very atmospheric, I should say. There is music, but it's meant to reinforce the vibes as opposed to it's meant to reinforce the overall aesthetic as opposed to being able to be an earworm and just kind of creep into your head and just let it linger there type of thing, you know?
Right. And even the sound design too, while a lot of the music is more atmospheric pads and long God, I have a music degree and I'm blanking on the names
Use
here.
that music theory, baby.
Oh, absolutely. At last a chance to use my jazz degree. You know, the sort of extended chords and those ideas that again, when you have something far more voiced in a bigger open voicing, they don't clash with each other, but they're interesting. They're crunchy, and you can just kind of live in that a bit. And
Hmm.
those are more, you couldn't do that on a Commodore 64 or an NES or anything like that, but the sounds, the sound design evokes those ideas, those sorts of like made with chip tunes, made with the sound chip of the computer or the console that's powering it, but none of them are necessarily chirpy or big. There's a lot of times where you hear throwback soundtracks or hear those sound effects and it grates in your ear forever. It's either big or loud or just high pitched. And a
Hmm.
lot of Animal Well, there isn't as much high end. It's a little more masked. It's a little more, you know, I don't whether that's reverb or depth or the EQ, whatever it is those sorts of sounds, but none of it's ever obtrusive. Like you were saying, Josh, like it's all there. You recognize it and you would recognize its absence, but it's just all there in a
Hmm.
good way.
It's the definition of like good sound design is sound design you don't notice.
Yes.
You
It's
know,
atmospheric.
it doesn't stand out. It doesn't make itself known, which is a good thing. Like it works just exactly the way it's supposed to. And I would almost argue it has great sound design just because it's so unremarkable. Because the like unremarkable, I shouldn't say it like that. It's you know,
Unobtrusive. Everything is
unobtrusive.
distinctive.
Yes,
You know when
yeah.
something's working or not working. You know when what's happening is because it's never going to work, it's not working right now, whatever. Like all of those pieces are there. You never really run into, you know, when it doesn't work, you get like the loud like ding kind of sound that just
Hmm.
gets in your head. You all of it is clear. But yeah.
I would almost argue the most used sound piece, music, sound effect, or otherwise, is just water drips in a cave. Like that, like I feel like you
Yeah.
just hear that all over the place.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I think you're right. There's and again, it's all part of the soundscape. All of it is very
Hmm.
much, which is again why I say the look and the sound of the game. It's vibes. That feels very cliche right now as we're saying it, but I have nothing better as far as that goes to say. It's
No,
ethereal. It's atmospheric. It matches the subterranean vibe. It's cavernous. It's vibes.
it's vibes, and also if the last thing I'll say, the last thing I have on the visuals and music and aesthetic is the game. They put like a CRT filter over the whole thing. Like even on the
Yeah,
Switch, you have like CRT, like oh my gosh, the what's the term for the
RGB
line?
kind of thing, or like the sort of the fuzzy glow. Yeah, the CRT filter on top of it.
It's a CRT filter, but there's actually like scan lines. There it
Scan
goes.
lines.
That's I could not think of the word scan lines.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
it all fits in with the scan lines. But Jeff, do you have any final thoughts on the aesthetic and visuals before we kind of go into the spoiler section of the game of the episode? I mean,
It does a an excellent job of there are joyous moments, there are terrifying moments, but not in a jump scare kind of way, not in anything like that. It all sort of lives together. It all melds well. This is that idea of, you know, you make a real good stew and you leave it in the fridge for a day or two so that all the flavors can really get together to the point where you don't know where one ends and the other begins.
yeah, yeah.
That's the design here in that when it gets scary, it is in a way that's a little creepy and a little just gets under your skin without changing much. Maybe the colors are different. Maybe there's a shadow that you didn't notice, but there's little bits of whatever that all kind of the same tools, the same pieces. It doesn't suddenly become like, flashing lights, big loud noises, snarls, or anything like that coming at you. It's just using the same palette to tell that emotion. There's a consistent palette. There's a phrase that I love using that I certainly didn't come up with, but it's what I use for describing a lot of my favorite things in indie games, and it's deliberate design.
Hmm.
The idea of you can explain any design decision, most design decisions, you can explain them. You just have to, and not even necessarily with words, but if you create consistency, I'll believe the character does anything. Do they fly? Do other people fly? Is there a reason for them to fly? Is this the sort of game where that happens? Whatever reason you give me, if it seems deliberate, if it seems like it, well, we chose this. All right, cool. Hell yeah, we fly, sort of thing. And this one has a clear choice of sonic, visual, ludonarrative palette
Hmm.
that it lives within well and was chosen at all. And yeah, no, it was chosen well, but and I suppose
Nah.
that'll be my final comment on that.
uh, um, no, I can't. I don't think I could have said it any better. Like, just everything of the visuals works for this. It may not be everyone's cup of tea, of course. If you don't like 2D pixel art, like, it's not, you're not going to really enjoy it. But like, it just, everything is cohesive. It all aesthetically makes sense. Even like the items that you get kind of as mishmashy. Like, let me put it this way: just like the animals they choose to put in this animal well, as it were,
Yeah.
um, they're very mishmashy. Like, if you, that statue area we mentioned before, there is a seahorse, an ostrich, like a lizard or gecko or whatever, and then like a wolf or
You'll
like
recognize all the animals, but they do not belong together.
yes, though the wolf kind of looks like a cat. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
Um,
that could be some confusion for a
but
while.
other than that, it, like, you'll recognize, and they don't belong together, but because it all kind of fits together visually, kind of matches with the gameplay, because you get lots of weird items.
Hmm.
You know what, I just to tease a few, but not explain, because they don't, none of the items do what you expect them to do. And that's where, so I'm not going to explain what they do here in the non-spoiler section, but just as a little teaser for those who may be curious, you have, like I mentioned before, the bubble wand. Like you mentioned, Jeff, the disc. There's also just a bouncing ball or a remote and a yo-yo. And like, what do those all do? You'd be very surprised once you figure it out.
There's a
Um,
slinky. It behaves exactly as a slinky does. What does that do? Find out.
you have to find out. One last thing I'll say before we go into the spoiler section, and something I can't believe I forgot to bring up in like kind of like the little history, like fun fact section. This is one of the first games published by Video Game Donkeys label,
Yes.
which is, Donkey isn't a polarizing character figure in the games. I mean, some people love him, some people hate him. I honestly don't even have, like, I'm not even saying this to be diplomatic. I don't have a strong opinion one way or another
Same.
on
Largely
on him.
ambivalent.
Like, it, some of the stuff he said, I'm like, well, that's just stupid. Like, he was very braggadocious about, like, well, I know what it takes to make a good game because I like good games. I'm like, well, that seems kind of, that's a bit of a stretch, but okay. But then the first game that his thing that, like, the first notable game out of his publishing studio is this, which is one of the best games of all time, like the best games of the year, period,
Yeah, I would
maybe
say
of all
this.
time.
Yeah, well, and I would say this game isn't for everybody. It's not. It is one that encourages thoughtful care. The pace can get a little uneven sometimes, but
Yep.
the, you know, I remember Aaron Hansen, Ego Raptor's sequelitis videos and talking about Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and
Hmm.
how, it's always find the little eye, shoot it with the arrow, open the door. You should never feel bored or go, I'll check this room later. In a game about checking rooms, Animal
Yep.
Well can have a different uneven pace that may not be your cup of tea. But if you do want a game about checking rooms, and I know that's an oversimplification, but if you want a game about checking rooms, this is absolutely the best one I have ever played, ever found, ever. If there's a better one, tell me about it. I want to play it. But right now, Animal Well on top.
Agreed, agreed. And shout out to Eco Raptor, man. Like one of the first people that I could see on the internet do really well. I shouldn't say one of the first people, but one of the first that I found to do really thoughtful games criticism in terms of like a video essay type of thing.
Oh yeah, and positive and negative.
Yeah, very, very like fair in the sense that he talks about his pre-existing biases or bias, whatever you pronounce
Yeah,
that word, uh,
biases, yeah.
biases, and owns it, but also is able to give both positive and negatives. Always, I haven't watched a lot of his sequel. The only ones I've seen are Mega Man X, and then obviously Link, Ocarina of Time.
Those are the two really good ones. The
Yeah,
the Castlevania ones are fine, but he only has two other ones. They're both Castlevania games. But Mega Man X and Legend of Zelda are definitely the two that those stuck with me. Jeez.
really excellent videos, and it's that type of criticism is kind of why this. I mean, it's not a direct inspiration for this podcast, but it definitely has like some influence on it. I what we've been talking about for the last hour and change is just breaking down Animal Well in just similar idea, like what the talking about the ideas it tries to present, how well it achieves them, and all this. So I'm going to
Yeah.
rehash all the stuff we just talked about. Go back and listen to it again.
Yeah, no, because that's the idea of art, that like very
Yeah,
Roger Ebert idea of it's not is this good or is it bad? What is it set up to do and does it do it well? Animal Well succeeds. It
agreed.
definitely succeeds at what it sets up to do.
Agreed. Well, let's move on over to the spoiler section of the game. We're going to talk about the more in-depth mechanics of this game, what different items that you get, the different tools at your disposal in the game, and what you can do with them. I'm going to just list them off all right here real quick, and then Geoff, just talk about like one of your favorites. We're not. I'm not saying we're going to go into every single one beat by beat or bit by bit,
Of
but
course.
like at the very least, we could talk about some of our favorites. So you have your firecracker, you have your bubble wand, and an upgraded bubble wand, disc, the slinky, the yo-yo, the lantern, the remote, the bouncing ball, the UV lantern, and the wheel. Um, so there's so many cool things with all these. Geoff, what's one of your favorite items? I guess we'll start off with that.
Well, I have to, for the honor of my household, shout out the bouncy ball because it allows you to play Arkanoid in this game.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I married someone who loves pinball and Arkanoid and just ball physics games in general, and a lot of other games as well. We're playing Persona 3 together. It's great. But the fact that Arkanoid is in here just made me so goddamned happy. The two others that I would really shout out, I love the flute because I think there's
Yo,
no
yes.
other item that has a better sense of solving puzzles in this game in the style of checking everywhere. It feels like the early days of playing Myst kind of thing of just
Uh-huh.
you don't know where it is. And you know often again, I referenced my music degree earlier. A lot of times in like escape rooms or puzzle boxes or things like that, if there's a music puzzle, I overthink it because I run into that XKCD comic of experts overestimating the layman's knowledge.
Yeah.
And so this was one that I didn't have to overthink it, and the clues that they gave were so juicy. It was
Yeah.
just, and every discovery was like, how'd you find that out? Well, I just did this. I waited in this room for a moment and watched the fish pop out of the water, and I did
That
its directions.
blew my goddamn mind when I figured that out.
Oh my God. And if that was the only song you discover in the game, you're good, you're fine. And actually, this kind of lends itself towards that Legend of Zelda idea, because the flute does a lot of things in the first Legend of Zelda, but the first thing it does is it teleports you around. And the bubble wand made me think of the first Legend of Zelda because you get the blue candle because it shoots the flame once in a room, or the red candle, which gets you unlimited shots, which is kind of what the bubble wands do. There's like, I didn't think of that until you mentioned this just now. And so oh my God. And I think that's something I love about this game. It has a sense of lineage to it, or a sense of, you know, it loves games and
Hmm.
games in there, and it loves play. But my favorite's got to be the disc. I know it was the first one I found, but also I accidentally discovered that you could ride on it. And
Yeah.
that was how I got the PSN trophy of like, discover a new way to travel. And I'm sorry, I'm just spinning on this thing. It flies until like it gets knocked down or I jump off. Look at me spin. Oh,
You're
this
talking
is
about the disc,
fun.
right?
The disc, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just want
The
to make
disc is
sure.
my favorite. Sorry, and so that was, and then that just became I mean, it became my go-to of trying to solve puzzles. Like, how can I use the disc to solve this? I diversify, but it was always the first one I went to. So,
Well,
maybe
it
you never forget your first doctor kind of thing. Like, I like the disc.
it goes back to what you mentioned in the spoiler free section, how almost every item has a second purpose for it.
Yes,
So like for example, the bubble wand, and then it's obviously it's upgraded, which thank God that upgrade is such a rewarding thing where you in the original bubble wand you can only have like what one bubble at a time or
exactly.
two
Look,
or
look at the
something like
candle.
that.
Just one.
Just one, yeah. So it was you could only essentially was a double jump at that point.
Hmm.
Uh, that's kind of what it was, a double jump that required a little bit more precision. But then the advanced bubble wand or the upgrade, you could do as many as you want. And then you could traverse upwards infinitely so long as you landed on the next bubble up and it didn't get popped by anything.
And yeah, there
The
wasn't a hummingbird to pop it. And there's also the rooms that you find that already have bubbles happening, so that when you find the wand, you have that idea of what the bubble is meant to be as the
Well,
double
and
jump.
when you find the wand, so I found the wand first before I found that bubble room. And
Oh,
I had to figure out how to get out of that area using the bubble wand. I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this exactly? Oh, I see. So I like tried jumping on. I'm like, well, I don't know what else to do. Let me just jump on this bubble. I'm like, oh, I can stand on this bubble. Okay, let me jump
yes.
off to safety and see if I can let it float a little bit higher before I jump on it.
Hmm.
Okay, that works. Um, and like you said with the disc too, how like I figured the same thing out where I found it out by accident. I accidentally landed on top of the disc, and all of a sudden, it just is like I'm just sitting on it and flying across the screen. And if there is nothing impeding you, like you said, you can traverse from screen to screen to screen and use that to like travel long distances very fast.
Yeah, and it's super fun that, there's some items you can use while you're on the disc, some you can't. And again, the bubble room that I'm thinking of, the big tall one that kind of spans multiple screens, was one of the first areas I got to that gave me an even deeper feeling of, oh, yeah, no, anything is possible in this way. Not always, but I'm jumping on the bubbles. Oh, it gets me clear across to the other side where there's another door. But it's also open up and down. What happens if I drop? Oh, there's more. What happens if I go up? Well, I'm back here. Do I keep going? I keep going.
Hmm.
There's, and again, you don't have to find the bubble wand for that room to be interesting, useful, fun. And it never has a feeling of, this is the tutorial room for the bubble wand.
Yep.
Bubbles are a generative platform, kind of thing about it. It just is. And you had to solve it on your own, and I got the journey of knowing beforehand, but whatever. And
What was your first item? Sorry to cut you off. What was the first item you picked up? Was it the disc?
it was the disc. Like, I picked up the fake disc, got chased by the ghost, and was like, okay, okay,
What's
okay, cool.
happening?
Okay, cool, cool. And then I maybe I found the bubble wand after that, but I feel like the disc was oh, this is interesting. What's going on here? I found the fake disc, I swapped it out, and like it was such an earned item for me that it definitely feels like the first one for to my recollection.
And you know what? That disc is a perfect example of the whole layers of secrets
Hmm.
in this game because so the first time you get the disc, when you find you'll see like this the dog statue, and you grab the disc, and all of a sudden it starts chasing you. You're like, oh shit, what if
Indiana
I put it
Jones.
back? And then it goes away. I'm like, oh, okay, that's how you're supposed to do. Or that so I have to find something maybe to replace it. Then you
Yeah.
find the M disc later on. You're like, oh, that makes a whole lot of sense. So you put the M disc in the dog's mouth, and all of a sudden you can take the regular disc and you can put the fake one in, and it doesn't bother you.
Yeah.
So like, okay, I can get this permanently. That's the first secret. That's like discovery. That's like your normal level of secret, right? Maybe
Yeah.
that's like just casual or standard, or whatever. What did I write down? It was the
Foundation.
foundational. Thank you.
Of course.
Um, and then discovery is when you realize what you're supposed to do with some of those discs, how you put them on pedestals, and you have that. Then there's different pedestals for all the different animals and everything for those four statues or whatever.
Hmm.
So then you kind of move on and you have to find where the dog statue is, and then you have to plan out your path. Like once you find where it's supposed to go, the pedestal it's supposed to go on, you have to figure out the fastest way to get there while also dodging this ghost dog chasing after you.
And
uh
it,
Super intense moment. That's where I actually used the flute to do the warp whistle.
I did the
um
same thing.
and then I think I did the one warp. I forget exactly where it was at. It was I guess they're dog heads is what those things are. I didn't realize those were dogs.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think it's the dog head that takes you to the nearest area or the nearest drop off point. But
yes.
because the teleporter room is on the map, but it's on the lower left hand side of the entire map. So you go to the warp room and just wait for the ghost to catch up to you. And as soon as it like gets as close to you as possible, you go through the dog head and you still have to run like crazy, but you at least have a chance. And that was the only way I was able to do it.
Yep, that warp room was so that's exactly what I did too. I like because
Oh yeah.
what it's almost like this is an absolute awful description of this, but it's almost like if the world map was like a JPEG and you have this PNG dog floating across the top of it, just transversing over or traversing over the image as it goes across. Then it finally gets down to the room that you're in, and you're like, all right, now we gotta take this portal and jump all the way up to the top of the map. So then you can hear just going like just the whole way, even though it's like rooms and rooms and so far away from you. But like you
Yeah.
said, you still have to haul ass, and you also have to kind of plan out your path beforehand so that way you don't die in trying to get to it.
Right. It's and there is a little bit of forgiveness in there. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm also replaying Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga right now, and I had to do the damn surfing mini game about 1,000 times before I got my time under 40 seconds, and that allowed for no mistakes. None. This you can move around a little bit, but also along the way, if that I also do want to mention this is one of those instances that I was referring to of using the palette, or in this case, stepping just a little outside the palette to terrify you. Because, yeah, all of the animals and all of the other living things within this world follow the scan lines, follow that CRT glow, and behave in whatever way that they do. The second this thing pops up, yeah, you're right. It's sort of like an image over the image, and it flashes in a much different way, and it wobbles and moves in a very I mean, I don't know how naturally anything in this game moves, but it is unnatural to the verisimilitude of the world. So it is clearly otherworldly, different, out there, and so it gets you instantly. And while you're running past that area, once you take the dog head, anytime that ghost touches one of the dog statues, more ghosts come out.
Yep.
It's awful, but it's very satisfying when you do it right.
And well, what is it? The way it kind of moves, the way you like you said, it moves very otherworldly compared to the rest of the game. I'd almost say it moves like a slinky, but not up and down from left, like horizontally almost.
Very
It kind of
liquid. Yeah,
or
it's got
in
the
any
weight.
direction. It'll like compress and then stretch out, and then compress and then stretch out. So it's just very unnerving to watch it float across the screen very slowly. But since it's so big and it takes up a lot of the screen, you have to be very smart with your dodging when you're
And
trying to get around it.
yeah, and it isn't an instant death. It hurts you, but it
No.
doesn't kill
Yeah,
you
you're right.
instantly. So that is both a mercy and a terrifying
Hmm.
because it creates that whole like I was saying before, most of the game is take it at your own pace. Try again, fall in the water, you're fine. There are some hazards here and there, but you're okay. This isn't a you only get one try, but it's probably the longest marathon of a try. And it's definitely one of those, all right, you've mapped it out. I'm going to do that. The dog, the ghost is coming. I'm in the warp room. All right, I've gone through the warp. This is where the run starts. Let's go. As soon as it hits you, if at any point you feel like you're losing ground, and it's always so much easier to lose more ground once you've started. So it's a whole incident, and frankly, it's the only one like it in the game. There's things similar to it, but this is like the big one, and they make the most of it.
Um, something else. We use the disc as an example of the secrets here.
Yeah.
Um, I would say the other thing that like really stuck out to me with just how many secrets there were, and I would say this is like the prime example of secrets is just the animal flute, like you mentioned before.
Yeah.
I'm looking on the wiki now. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 songs. I only know technically one of them. I'm not quite sure where you're supposed to find all these others, but like I'm not even going to, just in case you haven't got into it, Jeff, I won't say it out loud.
Oh no, I've
'Cause
gotten to this. I've gotten to the second credits.
oh,
So
there's a second credits. Okay, yeah, you did more than I did.
I found every single egg.
Okay, I did not. I got pretty far. I got like I'm probably missing 10,
Okay.
maybe.
Yeah. I mean, that was the thing where probably the last few eggs was also a. I found this, the Animal Well interactive map where you can kind of pop things in and out. I was just going into rooms and being like, okay, did I miss something? But also the remote's useful for finding that. But I did that. I used the UV light to find a lot of secrets, and it was just kind of a. I just, I'm starting to get a little antsy. I've been taking my time, but I want to get all the eggs. Let's get. I probably found the last three or four doing that.
Well, I
And
think to get the
yeah,
UV one, you need to get to the second fast travel room,
yes,
right? Which I did not know existed at all
Mm.
until I looked up this. I don't even know how you figure out the song for the fast travel room.
Because when you go into the area before, kind of, I'm trying to remember. It's past the snake room, I
So
think.
like the regular fast travel room I figured out because
Yes.
you when you like you said when you go down to the lower level there's a fish that pops out of the water
Hmm.
and you use the directions on that he's going or it's going in order to figure out the warp songs to take you to the first fast travel room. I did not know there was a second fast travel room, and there's like there's a completely different set of inputs for that.
Yes. Well, because there's a different form of sea life that you have to follow its movements, but it's more aggressive. So you have to dodge it while also keeping track of what it's doing.
How were you able to like out of curiosity? How did you come to the conclusion that that animal was also like something that would teach you a song?
I think it was one of those where I also if anything was having a lot of directions that wasn't controllable by me, I just tried it. I was just looking for patterns.
Okay.
There's animals where if I don't know what they're doing, like, okay, you're just aggressive. Okay, you're just aggressive. Okay, this one is just kind of following me. That's its own thing, like the snake after you get the remote control. But this was one where it was like kind of doing a clear dance, I suppose.
Okay.
And so that was one where I'm like, yeah, okay. And went from there. Knowing that there were multiple songs, I also eventually, you might notice while looking at the wiki that there's an especially long song on there.
Yes. Yeah. It's oh
So,
my gosh. What is it? It's
so that is
is
part
it
of
the,
getting to the second credits.
I
And
think it's the bunny song. One of the bunny songs.
it's not a bunny song.
Okay.
But
Okay.
there,
I
there
think
is a
I
bunny.
looked it
There
up
is a bunny
before.
song, and I figured that one out. Turn the with the duck.
I don't even think I figured out the bunny song. Oh, it's uh
No,
the egg song.
the egg song, yes. That one was a matter of I figured out what they were trying to tell me, but I also knew that I like kind of checked my answers and went, okay, yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. I in my younger days, I would write down passwords in a notebook. There were definitely like little case books of figuring out puzzle games and point and click games. I loved doing that. By that point in the game, I'm like, I have this right here. It's correct. I know it is. Let's go, kind of thing. But
Hmm.
yeah, no, a lot of it is just sort of it's pattern recognition and building on top of it. And it's sort of I think the other thing about discovery with this is a lot of games they have a clear idea, I suppose, where you're going, okay, there's discovery of what is the nature of the game. Oh, it's pushing blocks. Okay. Or, oh, it's finding this thing or it's opening this up. You find a clear gameplay loop. The gameplay loop of Animal Well is always explore.
Hmm.
Everything else is secondary. So it never gets to, oh, now it's a block pushing puzzle. Oh, now it's a, combat game. Now it's a flight game. Now it's a, shoot 'em up. It is always explore. It's a platformer explorer. But any matter of go around, find patterns, find what item, what area is best applied to that pattern. If something's moving in cardinal directions, try the flute. If something seems to, have certain blocks, well, try to break those blocks. If there's a clear, like, well, this is leading me an area, it's the sort of puzzle X thing. One of my favorite non essential uses of the disc is it distracts dogs. It doesn't
Yes.
distract any other animal. But if you throw a frisbee, dog's going to go after it. And if they can catch it, well, then they're going to come after you. But if you can get it in such a way that it just bounces back and forth endlessly, they're going to keep chasing that disc. And that's how you can sneak past them. Like, I
There,
love that.
there's so many that brings me back to the thought of like how many different extra uses there are for the different tools and everything. We touched on it earlier, but like the bubble wand, right? The first use is just an extra platform, and then eventually an infinite platform that you can, or an infinite number of platforms you can jump on.
Right.
But
But yeah, we didn't say the other one.
it's also the fast travel sort of. You put it onto these like these fish heads or whatever,
Yeah.
and you can jump into them and it'll suck you through, and you can go to a new area of the map that you have not been before yet.
And it's an interesting, so again, things that can be both helpful and harmful, things that sort of have multiple functions, and also where things overlap. But I'll
Hmm.
start with the first point of this with the bubble wand of there are some animals that disrupt the bubble wand. Hummingbirds will always immediately you if they have access to you, you make a bubble, they go for it, they peck it,
Yep.
gone. Those fish heads, those eels, lungfish, whatever it is that are in pipes, if you have a bubble near them, yeah, they suck it up and they have a bubble in their mouth for a moment. You jump in that bubble, you can travel through the pipes. It's like an air bubble, so you can travel through the water. But the thing is, sometimes you're in rooms where you're trying to use the bubble wand as a platform to get to a higher fish head. But the first fish head that you don't want
Yep.
suck up the bubble, which is sometimes helpful, but right now is not what I want. So you have to work around that. It is still working as intended, but its intended function isn't always what you want. And on the flip side of that, two of the major things that a lot of your items do are break walls and break spikes, as far as covering areas or getting rid of hazards or opening up new spaces to go. You can use the disc for that. You can use the top. You can use the bouncy ball. You can use the yo-yo for a lot of these.
Hmm.
But depending upon either cardinal direction or how you utilize them, one might work better than another or what you prefer. But the thing is, sometimes, again, the uses overlap. I'm thinking of the room with the two otters in it, where there's a clear, you open this door on the other side by hitting two buttons, and the buttons have to be pushed at the same time. Normally, but it's got the little steps. What does the
Hmm.
slinky do? Goes downstairs. Great. Throw the slinky, it starts going down the stairs. As soon as you do that, this empty room, two otters run in, making cute little kind of sounds, and like just go after your toy because they're just going after a toy, and they
Yep.
break it, and you have to try again. And so part of it is using the slinky and using the yo-yo and using whatever goes through the platform that you're standing on above all of this to distract the otters enough so that you can use one and then use the other in the meantime before they get to it. They just need to be pushed at the same time for an instant. But it's not a matter of, oh, there's some magical use you don't realize. It's just sometimes you just got to distract them and use them. And the fact that they overlap in their uses, they both push buttons, is very handy and not an obvious solution necessarily. But when if you think about it for a moment, you go, well, yeah, I've got multiple ways of pushing buttons. Let's see what works. And how many of them do I
Hmm.
need to use at once?
There's just so many different ways to like tackle all these different challenges the game throws at you.
Right.
And because all the items or the tools have so many different and varied uses, it really just kind of lends it, like it reinforces everything about the game. Not like we were talking before, how the game's all about discovery. Not only are you discovering new items and tools, but then you're also discovering their second and third uses as you continue on through the game.
Yeah.
uh the another one that I like, that I got through, one of the coolest challenges, is the wheel.
Yeah.
The
Wheels
wheel
crazy.
is interesting because not only can it like break different barriers, like you were talking about before with I think you mentioned that before, right? How like some of the items can break the like stalactites and mites and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
um but it also can let you traverse over like spikes and not get hurt. So now all of a sudden, like rooms that were completely inaccessible to you, you're invulnerable while you're in the wheel.
And you feel like a tiny little god and you laugh.
Pretty much. But the way you get that is through another puzzle, through the the cats, the cats in cages. I needed a guide to figure this. Like I figured out I figured out up to the portion of like what you had to do. I could not find the song locations for everything.
I found 3 of them and then got impatient.
I
I'll be
found,
honest.
I think, one and then got impatient.
Hey,
I've
that's understandable. Well, that's the other thing. There's no counsel on how you go about this game. It's all about discovery and doing what you're willing to do. Something that often happens when my spouse and I play games together. We often play long RPGs. You can do side quests and grind things out forever. Play as much of it as makes sense to you. The point of this is fun and play. If you're having fun discovering, you're having fun discovering. If you solve the puzzle and then go, all right, cool. I solved the puzzle. Can you show me the solutions now? Whatever. You had fun, right?
mm-hmm,
There we
mm-hmm.
go.
And I think at least for this, I do feel a little bummed out looking up stuff because the whole point of the game is discovery and figuring stuff out. But that's actually like when I got the wheel, that's when I stopped playing, because I'm like, well, if I'm starting to look up guides now, that's kind of defeating the purpose of what the game is trying to get me to do, you know?
Yeah, I like to get, I'm very much an 80-20 kind of person, or I try to be at least. And I think if I found myself most of the way, I don't feel bad going for the rest of it. I'm not trying to submit a high score to a magazine. I'm not
Yeah.
sending into Sword Quest here. I'm also not, to throw it way back. I'm also in several ways, but I'm playing this to have fun and to talk about it with people because I love the game. And and I will like I played through most of what I played through without I mean, I checked my work a little here and there. It's kind of a have Josh, have you ever done a puzzle hunt?
I don't think so. I don't know if I've even heard of what that is.
So I do these at Gen Con, where there is a company called Loan Shark Games that do these, and there's other places that do. But at the convention, there's 16 different placards strewn
Okay.
all around this convention, and Gen Con is massive. It's across a convention hall and 4 hotels.
Okay.
So, yeah, not every floor of the hotel, but like the conference areas.
Hmm.
So still, you go around and you'll find them, and then each of those is their own puzzle. One of those ones
Oh.
where it's you need to figure out what the point of the puzzle is before even solving it. And they're all different kinds. One of them that I always think of that's kind of fun was around when Hamilton came out and they were talking about the opening song to Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton kind of thing.
Hmm.
And the long story short was they had the lines afterwards that were rhymes about the person they're talking about. All of the names matched the meter of Alexander Hamilton. That sort of, meter to it. So one of them was about the inventor of the light bulb, Thomas Alva Edison, kind of thing. And so you'd write that in.
Okay.
And the point of why there were so many is each of those puzzles had a solution, and part of that solution went into a larger puzzle. And part of the puzzle of all of this was finding those placards in the first place. And then the next step was figuring out what each of the puzzles were trying to get you to do. And then after that, taking the solutions from the puzzle and putting them together. And this is a lot like Animal Well. And at whatever stage of that you go, I'm done, I've done most of it, cool. So that's where I stand on it.
I think that's a healthy way to look at it. I think
I think I should
if
do it.
you find enjoyment by looking everything up, then by all means do it. Like I'm not going to tell you that's the wrong way to play.
Oh yeah. When Sarah and I play RPGs together, I'm on guidebook.
Um,
And we like to discover things on our own, but sometimes it's I'm eventually going to figure out the weakness to this. What's the weakness? You know,
yeah,
we have so
when
many hours to play.
that's I do that a lot too. It's like, okay, I know to figure out what I have to do, I'm going to have to trial and error for the next 30 minutes, or I can just look up. Like I already figured. I think those situations are interesting because you've already figured out the solution. It's just that you don't feel like going through like this is a game. Like I figured out the solution. Why am I going to have to painstakingly do the boring shit just to actually figure out the real technique? Like you said, like the boss's weakness, the boss has a weakness of some sort, then yeah, it's how can I put this? It's almost like you discover a new Pokemon and you don't know which element it's weak to. So you just go through your whole carousel of party members
Yes.
in your of your six Pokemon. Like, all right, is it weak to electric? No. Is it weak to fire? No. It's like I don't feel like wasting my time doing all that. Let me just find out their weakness so I can plan accordingly from now on.
Sometimes you do want to figure that out, and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to feel the joy of creation, and you will peel and slice and fry, and sometimes you just want some French fries, okay?
I do enjoy a good French fry every now and again.
And I enjoy the
Um,
satisfaction of making French fries, but not all the time. So
mhm.
it's one of those. And in the same way that we've been talking about how there's different layers of the foundation and of discovery and community within Animal Well, yeah, you can tackle each of these aspects on your own. If you know that you need the matches to light up the candles and you know that there's a limited number of candles, where was that last one? I saw it. Where was it? Look it up. The thing that I mentioned before the spoiler wall that I didn't realize it was, I didn't realize that thing in the first room to the left was a candle tracker.
Neither did I until I was looking at the map while we were talking on this episode.
And this was where I got to the second credits. I did the things that I wanted to do. I'm going to go back eventually. Like, I feel like right now I have done my first, like, full I'm good, I can walk away playthrough. I feel like I had a wonderful time at Disney World with this. And then I can come back later for the crazy stuff. Like, I found 3 bunnies. I'll find more later. But getting to that and not having well, what was that first thing? I know there's a spot that you can only get to if it only opens up if you've reached it and you haven't died. I'm not doing that. And it's only
Mhm.
it doesn't help you. I think you actually get a souvenir cup or something like goofy like that. So I was like, what is that? Oh, it's a candle tracker. If you figured out what that was, that's really useful. I was just looking for candles and I found
Yeah.
it that way. Same way that both brute force and conversed with the game to figure out how to use the bubble wand to get out of the area where you found it. It's
I
a
mean,
yeah.
yeah. I wouldn't even say I necessarily brute forced it. I mean, it's just like I just had I just played with the mechanics that it gave me. But that's I
You're
yeah.
right. Yeah, to say that you brute force, it's a little unkind, but yeah.
But no, it just the amount of stuff that this game encourages you to experiment with. I think the thing that we've been kind of getting at with this whole spoiler section, this game just encourages you to experiment and try new things that you never would have expected to be able to do with some of these items. Like we were saying in the non spoiler section, like you know. A disc. What else could a disc do? I'm like, oh, you can ride on it. Oh shit! How I did not know that. What about like the
Use the
UV
geo
lantern. The
on the
UV lantern helps you see in the dark areas, but it also there's like those like weird ghost wall things. I don't know how you would describe
well,
them.
any of the spirits in the game, they only appear in the dark, and you don't put that together necessarily until you get the lantern, and maybe even after the fact. That's
Hmm.
why the spirit doesn't, why that ghost doesn't chase you that first time you encounter one, because it's a dark room. But once you leave the darkness, it can't get you. And so the lantern is bringing that with you the whole time. And so there's a really interesting back and forth on that. But yeah, like all of those just like bouncing ghost spirit things, and even the helpful ones, again, the platform ones that just follow
Hmm.
you. Sometimes you want them gone, sometimes you're thankful for them. Lantern is useful.
Every item's useful. That's what I love this game, man. It was
Yeah.
just the joy of discovery is just so palpable.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
And you never know, and you find a few eggs before you even know what they're used for.
Yes, I was so confused for the longest time what the eggs were even used for. Just I'm like,
You
why am I
just put it
grabbing
on
these?
your
What's
nightstand. It's a nice little egg. Can I offer you an egg in this trying time? Kind of thing.
But then you find that like peacock, like
Ooh,
shrine or
yeah.
throne or whatever it is, and I'm like, oh, these eggs look familiar. Oh, the eggs I collect are appearing on this. Oh, there's these doors to the left that have like different number of slashes on it. I wonder if I got six eggs. There were six slashes on that door, and now that door is open.
Yeah, and it's a
Okay.
low enough number that like the first one gets you and you go, well, that top one has a lot of eggs.
Yep.
Uh, and you want to know what's back there. And it's important to know what's back there. And it is a little weird, but it's very cool. But but yeah, it's a lot of that. And so another, I like having like a two things kind of thing for comparison with games often on different axes. And with all of the items, I almost think of it in terms of, bear with me for a moment, point and click games like a LucasArts games, one where you
Mm-hmm.
can't die, but you can try all sorts of dumb stuff, and Celeste, where it is less of a try stupid things on every stupid item levels of old point and click games. But Celeste was really the first game that I think of and look to and remember where it was challenging, it was punishing like a lot of older games were, but gave you a quality of life upgrade, as it were, of failure was never punishing or slow. You got back to the same checkpoint, probably on the same screen, and you were just right there. Try again.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first time it happens, it's almost disorienting. You're like, oh, really? Okay, cool. And you just keep going. And so all of these items, it's try something out. Did it work? No. Okay, keep going. Or try it a little different. And so finding those different, so those discoveries never feel too belabored too often. When they happen, it's the joy overtakes any frustration getting there. And
Mm-hmm.
there's enough clear telegraphing of, oh, I've activated a bunch of fans. Well, I've got enough items that fly around. Do they push bubbles? They push bubbles. Does it move the disc if I throw the disc over it? Yeah, just a little bit though, just when it's over it. I wonder how I can
Mm-hmm.
use that kind of thing. And both of those are useful for both traversal and hitting buttons. Again, the uses overlap, their applications are unique.
So it very much reminds me, like you mentioned Celeste, and what I love about Celeste is that they give you really a very few. Oh, they expand the mechanics as the game goes on, but generally each chapter is like they introduce a mechanic to you, and then they iterate on that mechanic within the world's levels or within that chapter's levels. And in Animal Well, I didn't even think about it with the fans that you just mentioned. How like the first time I encountered the fans, it allows you to jump higher, and then the
Yeah.
second time you get the bubble one. Like, oh, I wonder if it'll push me up with the bubble, so I don't have to keep making new bubbles. Oh shit, it does. And then you add the disc into that, and like you just said, it pushes the disc up just slightly, and you use that for to solve some other puzzles later on. It's the tools that they give you gives you multiple mechanics to play with, and then on top of that the environment changes the mechanics that they've taught you, and you can experiment with it in new ways. It's just there is, we talk about how this game is all about secrets and it's filled with secrets and there's a lot of depth and like complexity to them. It's reflected in the mechanics because the items do give you almost, I'm not going to say it's exactly three levels, but it's kind of like the three levels from before. There is a standard level, there is your foundational level, a discovery level, and community level almost to all of the items as well.
Yeah, there is, and it allows for single use moments, but because it's an item that's so useful elsewhere, there's a few rooms where just playing the flute, not playing a specific song, just the noise of it, causes something to happen. Not
Yeah.
many of them, but, rather than having a bell to ring to make this thing happen, just use the flute. And you mentioning Celeste and how, well, us talking about Celeste and you mentioning how every level there's kind of a new mechanic that they iterate on. Linear games, linear platform games allow for anti-piece areas where here's the new here's the new thing, the new hotness, the new item, the new danger in one version. Here is another piece of it. Here is it together. Those ways that they show you the mechanic, they teach you the mechanic, you practice the mechanic, you apply it in a challenge. because this is a Metroidvania and one that is meant to feel a little open, a little more open than most, I think, you can't have a direct line of those sorts of challenges. But because the uses of the items are wrapped up into themselves in a way that you don't necessarily know how deep you've gone because it's the same inventory slot the whole time, you can get to those new spots and you can learn a new potential usage later. When you first get the top, you use it within the first few rooms because you're just like, check out this top. And it starts digging into the ground.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, okay, oh my God. And like, all right, cool, I'll do all
Where
that.
else can I use this?
Right. And you're sort of like, how the fuck am I supposed to know that that works? That was an accident. God damn it. Then you get the UV light. And amongst the many secrets it shows, and there's helpful ones too, where if the UV light shows an egg, it lets you know that there's a secret around. You know, a far more obscure game, but one of my favorites, Oddworld Abe's Exodus. If there's Soulstorm bottles on the screen, there's a secret kind of thing. It telegraphs that. But the UV light, you walk around with that thing on, and then suddenly, big drawing of a top right where you need to use it. And you're like, oh, that's how. And as I was referring to before, the spoiler wall, sometimes you find an item, it seems arbitrary, and another piece helps you out. It's finding all sorts of other things for you, but it lets you know how the top works. And in the meantime, the top is also a great way to clear out a lot of spikes on the floor. So, multiple uses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a game about discovery.
It is a game about discovery. And I'll be honest, man, I don't know much more we can add to it. We've been going for nearly 2 hours. Is there any final thoughts you have on the game in general? I think we should wrap it up here. Because we could probably go on more and more about the different mechanics that we like.
Yeah, we could do a whole mini series just talking about each item, or just God, yeah, no, it's one of those games. I love when a game inspires introspection, inspection, a deeper look. Like, there's so many things, especially being people who talk about games in a public forum like we are. It is very easy to feel that little inner critic go, you're getting too pretentious about this. You're going a little too deep. I don't know if there is too deep, which is another goddamned pun. But I'm sorry. I'm not sorry is the problem.
No, I
But
wouldn't be.
right. But the thing is, all of those bits and pieces, you can pull out each little piece and inspect it. And something I'm finding in a lot of my favorite recent indie games is something that Animal Well does. It makes complexity out of a handful of simple things. Any one of these items, they're single use. Any one of the ways that you solve a puzzle, whether because you see a little bit of that kind of just looks like some vines hanging. Can I walk past them? I can. Go behind the waterfall, or break this, or drop that, whatever it is. Any one of them is very simple. It's not a hugely complex, it doesn't require a ton of button presses, and with few exceptions, doesn't necessarily require huge amounts of dexterity, certainly on the foundational level. But all of them together makes a rich, vibrant world. All of them have their own biome, they have overlap. And so it makes for this very fulfilling game where, yeah, the things I've said a few times, and just as let's put it here as a summation, it is a game of discovery where everything feels possible. Whether it is or it isn't, it will still feel possible. And very few games get that right. Animal Well does.
I also think it's a game that's like, I'm trying to think, I realize we've been talking this whole time and I haven't really addressed any criticisms. I can't think of a criticism. That's the issue.
Well, like I said, the pacing can feel a little uneven at times. There are definitely, depending upon how deep you want to go, if you're somebody that wants to find everything, good fucking luck. And you can find yourself in spots where, like, I don't know what to do with this kind of thing. There is joy in using everything, but sometimes there's spots where it dries up a little. But that would probably be my one criticism. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but it is a notable thing for somebody before they go into the game and before they kind of set for themselves, How deep do I want to go?
Well, I was thinking more or less that this game's biggest criticism I can think of is that it's more on it would be on like on a personal level almost.
Yeah,
Like it's one of those things, people have listened to the show for a while know I have lots of issues with like Soulsborne games.
right.
And I'm not going to repeat all those. I bring it up enough as it is, but the I tried whenever I bring up those criticisms, I feel like it's very much a me thing and not necessarily the game. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I feel
That's
like
important to know.
like I feel like any criticisms that could be levied at it would be by someone who just doesn't like Metroidvanias or who doesn't like games that are purposely a little obtuse. But I I don't know. I feel like obtuse is used in such a negative. It has such a negative connotation, and I don't. I almost use it
I
as a
I
compliment in this instance.
if I may, I would suggest opaque.
Opaque. There you go. Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good way to describe it. This game is much more opaque.
Yeah, like
Um,
I ordered I yes, I got this game free on PS Plus, but I also ordered the limited run copy because I did not mention this at the top of the show at all, but I am an avid physical video game collector. And when I love a game, I want a copy of it on my shelf if I can. And so my spouse is waiting for our Switch copy to arrive before she plays it. She's definitely going to look up way more secrets than I did. She's going to enjoy discovery. She's going to enjoy finding all the ways that things go, but she is going to hit a wall faster or get to points faster. She just goes, I got I was playing it on the subway. I needed to figure this out. I just looked that up. And she's going to have a great time with it. I'm certain of it. And I think you're right, Josh. It's a very it's all subjective. That's what all game recommendations are. There's no perfect game. There's no game that everybody loves, unfortunately. But yeah, you just got to know you got to know what you know going in. And I think you're right. The criticisms for this are subjective ones.
well, I don't know where else we can go from there. I think this is the perfect spot to wrap it up, Jeff, and go into our plugs. This was
Yeah.
awesome, man. I honestly, when I scheduled this, I was not expecting us to go for over 2 hours, and I'm very happy we did. This was a really fun conversation
Yeah,
on
that's
Animal Well. And
yeah.
I can't thank you setting it. I can't thank you enough for setting aside so much of your evening for this recording session. Before we wrap this all up, where can the good people find you online, and what would you like to promote?
Well, first of all, Josh, thank you so much for giving me enough time and space to gush about this game. I'm really glad that
Of
we found this
course.
time together. I am, as mentioned at the top of the show, one of the producers and hosts of Fun and Games with Matt and Jeff. We are part of the Certain POV network, Fun and Games Pod on any social media that we're part of. We usually are on Twitter and Instagram for the most part. We do have a Tumblr. I keep meaning to write up more articles on there. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/Fun and Games Pod. I also, I mean, I like appearing on shows, and I'm an editor for a couple of our other shows for Men of Steel podcast and Another Pass. I also do editing for the Lore Party Network for their shows Gom Jabbar and Sci Fi Book Club. So honestly, I spend a lot of time looking at waveforms, is what I do. I'm also an actor and a voice actor. I unfortunately don't have anything at the moment that I'm like super plugging, but if you want to find out anything that I'm currently working on, you can find me on social media, whether Twitter, Instagram, or anywhere else at Geoff Makes Noise, Geoff. If, yes, that is how my name is spelled. Listen, I have to spell it every day. You can learn to spell it once too.
Hey,
But
I actually went to high school with a Jeff spelled that way.
it's kind of fun. It's for me, it is a little bit of an Easter egg hunt. When I run into, I mean, actually, anybody who's a gamer knows how to pronounce that name because the Game Awards and everything. And so there was a recent Fun and Games episode where we were talking about the Game Awards and showcases, and we just kept talking about, God damn it, Jeff, not you, Jeff, the other Jeff. So
The
made for
lesser Jeff.
yeah, exactly. We can argue about that, what have you. But yeah, no, I'm around and about. I love talking about games. I love making game recommendations and hearing about what other folks are playing. Because Fun and Games podcast, as a quick brief on it, is it's a podcast about the culture, the past, and the sort of environment of games and gaming. We like to have an optimistic view of games and gaming as well. There's a lot of negativity out there, but we believe that every game is somebody's favorite, and it's never too late to find a new favorite, or even though a game has been out for a day, a month, a decade, it's somebody's first time with it. And so we like to celebrate that. Our main show, we have interviews with all sorts of folks in and out of the games industry, developers, community managers, composers, as well as just all sorts of different topics. And we also have a side series called Side Quests, where it's a different host every episode talking about a game they love and why they love it. And you do not have to be a podcaster or a games journalist to talk about it, because we just want to share favorite games and people's enthusiasm for them. That one is mostly Matt's, but I do want to shout it out here because it is a fantastic thing, and I am so happy for what piece of it I contribute.
I've actually done 2 of those. I did a side quest on Power Pete, which I actually originally I was going to
That's
have you on for, and
right.
then I ended up getting. I actually got Phil Salvador from the Video Game History Foundation for that episode, and then I did Donkey Kong 64.
Josh, how did I forget that you did the Power Pete episode? I grew up playing that game on my Macintosh Performa.
You are the only other person that I know of besides Phil who has played Power Pete. I love that game
Before it
so
was Mighty
much.
Mike, I played so much Power Pete, and as a child playing it, I did not realize for at least a year that there was a button that let you change weapons,
Really?
because I was just shooting things. I don't know. I was 7. I was a damned fool. I've been playing games for ages, but I wasn't used to PC gaming. I had a Macintosh. So
And that's what I had a. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole. We'll save this for off mic. We'll save this
we'll
for
save
off
this
mic
for
because
Mike. Now this is
I
a whole new,
I
the secret episode, Power
I
Pete.
I love Power Beat Man. But all right, please go check out everything that Geoff does. And I will include links in the show notes. Please go check that out. For myself, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, all that good stuff at Still Loading Pod in all those locations. At Still Loading Podcast on YouTube. Also, did I mention Twitch? At Still Loading Pod on Twitch. I stream. I always forget to say this. I stream
I
twice a
play
week
Twitch as well,
usually.
but I don't do it often enough.
I I I stream twice a week, and I always say I'm on Twitch, but I never say when I'm streaming. I stream Tuesday and Saturday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. Actually, probably closer to 8:30 because my kid is deciding to go to sleep later. But
Oh.
it usually around that time, unless something comes up. But yeah, so 8 p.m. ish Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday and Saturday nights. If you want to support the show, please consider giving it a 5-star rating or review on whichever podcasting app you use. That pleases the algorithm gods, or so I'm told. And hopefully it'll help more people find the show. And it makes me feel warm and fuzzy, and I like feeling warm and fuzzy. You can also support the show over on Patreon, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. For $1 a month, you get all the episodes a little bit earlier with better audio quality, as well as access to patron voting rights, which when this episode comes out, there may actually be a poll going. I'm tempted to start up my next quarterly poll early because the idea I have for it, I might be a longer form game. I'm not quite sure yet. In any case, there is another poll. There will be another poll going up in the next month or so, if not sooner than that. That's all at the $1 level. At the $3 level, you get everything prior plus patron shoutouts, which you heard at the beginning of this episode. For $4 a month, you get bonus episodes along with everything else prior, mini bonus episodes. And then for $5 a month, you get everything plus access to my monthly movie podcast, which, let me see, this is coming out in August, so Still Bonding will still be going on. It's my monthly James Bond podcast where me and a bunch of friends bond over 007. But then after that will be Still Family, the Fast and Furious rewatch series over there. So going through different movies, that's just kind of my way of getting the movie geek side of me out. So that's all. You get a ton of stuff at the $5 level, so please go consider checking that out. Patreon.com/stillloadingpod. But that's it. That's all the time I got for you on this episode of Still Loading. Geoff, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you, Josh.
And with all that said, listeners, I will see you all next time.